We already begun some of the big picture. Uh, Fox Media sent in a marriage unit to my happy home named Lucarelli, which is like Lugarelli, Luke, um, Luke 16, and Alucard, which is Dracula spelled backwards. Lucas Studios. So we get some of the big picture from all that. Uh, Buckley and Bush and his minions sent me that Roddy Hardy from Eastwood's line of command on the West Coast with the Rosa Clemente crowd, the Black Panthers, to make people jealous so they wouldn't be on about me torturing uh, people with information about how we've been betrayed. And Bush and Buckley's crowd wangled a script by Gail Burston. They planned on the house. Claimed I was to blame for Lennon's murder. Woo, beep, beep, beep. And that would be my jackpot opportunity to get a lot of people listening. And they mongered this with Putin through Robert Fripp's headquarters. Brian Eno and Putin go way back. Remember that when you see Brian Eno's name on the cover of George Monbiot's book. Putin's always been soft on the I forget the word for it. It's a form of abstraction that some children suffer from. So you have a little networking play from playing fast and loose from corrections. Wattenmaker was working for Attica State Prison and became the vehicle for Yoko Ono to enact revenge on Watt in makers like Frankenstein and Auschwitz. And you know she was the victim of Tokyo firebombings. So the victim is coming to level the playing field through the usual lines of command, Church of England and so forth. Autism spectrum was what I was trying to think of. So we get these guys that we're creating a new norm. Now, I'm a civilized person and I like professors of learning in Russia, but I don't particularly field play with the idea of them getting into corrections through complicity of Trumpy Tune Media and Fox and CNN, which appears to be what is going on. And the dog yappy kids in the Midwest, just go around insulting everybody like it's proof that it's freedom of speech because you can't do that in Russia. But Chomsky's a smart man. He knows when things aren't really protecting our society from the state. Uh, when Zappa pulled false sponsors from Laurel Canyon, where Houdini lived, it was in service of cowhoods. They had a dog named Doo Deep Doo Doo in Iraq, who would chew cowhoods so he bite someone, they said. Who said this was Zella, the man who was talking about the scheme to transform the human race by injecting blood back in the early 80s, turn of the 80s. Running the mouse cage assembly at Jackson Immunogenetic. Yeah, he was Joseph Goebbels' loving magnate for the NAACP, white represented the NAACP and Jewish Defense League's harmonic interest in pussy ball and AIDS testing guinea pigs, and so forth. High risk hazing. Because when they set up the semiotic and wrote the script, they then pretended to find and switched over to Viktor Frankl's symbolic therapy, which is where Cornel West comes in. That's right, nobody's talking about it because the cerebralists was all, oh, Swami, Swami me. The reason they didn't tell anybody, the reason they said the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, I got to tell you who said that, was Amanda Harcourt. She's listed on Penis Gabriel's. She wrote me privately about treason of succulent machines and all this weird stuff. Said the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. The script was play on Stalin's one man's death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic. Everybody knows what these Inslee preppies from Navos Behavioral have in mind store for the elderly like me from Captain Cook's Kirkland depository where we first got, the elderly first got gassed by COVID-19, sort of thin off the tribe and give America a totem of equal victimization. And then they start up the rage in the Ukraine to civilize us with a new norm. It's cahooters. I'm not going to get into what the new norm is just yet. But we know from following how they operate and how they think that they switched over from setting up the storyline with the Hitler Reagan semiotic to Swami Nosha, where they started thematically bombing people. Let off the Jackson Labs. The Valdez was crashed for Valentine's Day, Earth First Indeed, and stuff. You know, make you feel better, which is it going to be? You know, we got to make them feel better, make it real. Theater of the real, theater of the absurd. Establish the packing order for the black man. Pack, 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 pack. Man, there we go to. Jimmy don't get her. Jimmy missed the chance to marry Midori Goto by squeezing the hearty of Eastwood. He don't get no Eastwood. The good kind do. What's their mentality is what I'm driving at. So it followed the Stalinist refrain, one man's death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic. So the reason why they said the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Amanda Harcourt said that, I remind you. An evil hour in 1984 when my father died and I was working at an installation by the FAMA who had me in D.C. when Reagan claims he was shot. Hollywood magic from Pentagon Disney. That's all the evidence shows. Made a little bit real with Lysander's theorems. They actually shot James Brady. The Brady Bunch got nailed because, you know, nice blonde boy. You know, he's good for a sacrifice. They had the installation of the Falk Medical Library for the early symptoms charts of AIDS. It was gruesome. I tried to warn people. They didn't want them more. They wanted to spook them like horses to the burning barn. The reason why Cornel West did that was because they didn't want to validate the individuals. No, that's right. They said biological linkage. They said, what we'll do is we'll contaminate Jimmy back in Captain Kirk's Kirkland. They, even before that, they poisoned me in the mouth. When Brett's gang from Disposable Planet, he's from Disposable Planet. That's in YouTube. Had a dude named Listerine. They poisoned me on the lip. Tulip was a revolution in Eurasia. They give me this image of Tulip and they wrote COVID on it. Before COVID was even heard of, they wrote COVID on it. Always in see them, they will contaminate Jimmy meat. This is Munyard Zappa claimed that Mount Desert Island wasn't really about the AIDS attack. He's given a knock of biological contamination of somebody in advance of COVID. How's that work? Are the queers releasing COVID to get even? How's that work? What we're dealing with is Yoko Ono's normal mentality. And the new norm is Yoko Ono's contribution to civilization in the United States of America. I'll give you an example. Bowie used to say just for one day. Well, they loafed around, they hung out in the halls, they chatted it up, they made nanny calls back home. They had all day to stop the killer in Uvalde. Just a pun. Jimmy Creary, they had all day, they had all month to try to look for him. They didn't look for him. And in their calculation, they could you've all day to figure out what the letters mean, queerball. This is Yoko Ono's norm. So we know that the reason they didn't, Al Sharpton and Cornel West didn't tell anybody was because they were terrified that the individual would be validated. People would say, what did they do this little kid? No, we can't have an individual validated. They'll think it's special. Better that a whole mass of people should be infected, and we have a new concept of sociology. They hated the idea of trying to warn people, absolutely hated it. And they created a forcing house. Yep, that's the term for it, a forcing house. Flame over Africa, they called it. These suave black psychologists were working with Todd Clark and Donald Oster. White brutalitarians who tortured a child, kidnapped a child, held a child hostage, molested the mind and body of a child because it was white. They had to support that. They had to support that because of the new sociology. It's false consciousness to believe the individual matters. No, son, the individual don't matter. So they hook up with Viktor Frankl's logo therapy, and the white is now not an individual that matters, but a logo that they get therapy from. And Yoko Ono trots out with a hottie from Asia and says, "Don't you want therapy from this hottie from Asia?" And you're supposed to say, "Well, only if she likes me and it's consensual." And correction says, "Here's what we'll do: is we'll reinstitute moral law." And Russia locks up young girls who try to warn people about the casualties in Ukraine, in case they fold about the odds being faced by the draftees. Locks her up, no trial, small cell, driven insane, force fed paint thinner, probably. God help us all. And Robert Fripp descends in his flying saucer through Attica, Ukraine, and says, "Dig, dig, Dugan." Upon him be peace, no harm intended. So they know that false sponsors are former cowboys. So Zappa comes out and says, "Oh, CIA this, CIA that." Paul McCartney says, "You better believe I'll manhandle your little girl if you don't do as I say. That's a mentality's fiefdoms. Whole secret to power is that they were laughing hard at Dealey Plaza. The Beatles was laughing hard. They got this thing going around that we was rescued. Our morale was rescued by giving them a red carpet. Welcome the Rolling Stones. Welcome Angela Dickinson. Welcome Jackie Onassis. Welcome Lee Harvey Oswald. Welcome George Takei. Welcome Dan Rather. Welcome the whole roster. Thanks. Captain Kirk of Kirkland, he goes up into the ultra high space. He says, "That sure is one shiny planet. You do what Al Gore says." Now, I'm inclined to think that we should think carefully about what our options are when it comes to saving the planet. The Russians are pushing into Antarctica. They have a new behavioral norm going in Ukraine with the help of John P. and Kissinger, who behavioral normed us back in the Vietnam War days. Remember when they were behavioral norming us? Boy, that was some behavioral norm. They were picking characters like me off the street at Navas. And the girls in Navas, I mean, the doctors of higher learning in Navas, the sacred leftists of the ultra right, they were picking up guys like me and saying, he had a one night stand. We're going to fix him. And they fix him, and they call that feedback looping. And they know, oh, of course they know who James Bevel and Diane Nash were. Oh, of course they study the enemy. They're not the enemy, they say. Their kind will be represented in the ark. The good leftists understand it's about saving the sheep from the shears. Equal rights for all species. Green Party of Germany. If Hitler had won, we would all be better off today. Did you get all that? That comes from Seattle, Washington. I kid you not. They put it on their magazine racks in Seattle, Washington. You can't laugh. No, you can't laugh. And these are the people who put up the darling, beautiful, intelligent Greta Thunberg. She's stuck in Moxieland, or else she's one of them. I can't tell. She won't answer me. I asked her, "Did you have knowledge of COVID before it happened?" And she disdained my question. They put up someone else talking sideways. I dared to try to save the planet. Is that what you did? Cutie. Well, don't put words in her mouth. I didn't put words in Will Zell's mouth. He sent me a picture of Greta Garbo with eye for an eye totementology to it. Geiger had me pull Greta out of the trash. Boy, have they been after me about that. So they prophesied, predicted, impinged Greg's thing. My love for Greta in an AI system, all cooked up by Carnegie Mellon's Fandango with Putin. Courtesy brother Eno and Geo Monbito. So this goes back to Luger Smelly. They don't hefty with big bosom for anything but children. We don't hefty the seven beauties for anything but children. So you do the 40 ministrations and get ready to meet the meat cleaver equity son. They have the veterans of the funny farm, monitoring, they call it. They follow the mail that I send to Courtney Kennedy and disappear a few more Kennedys for good measure. Yoko Ono's hymns of free smacks, and Bob Dylan announces that Kennedy has to pay it, a new song, and you all love it, don't you? Zappa says from beyond the grave. So you enjoy your healthy benefits. You enjoy your healthy benefits and don't get caught dead looking sideways at Kirkland. No, son. That's Captain Kirk's Kirkland. Geo Takai. Yes, indeed. Live long and prosper. Tojo Ronan.